Hello there, it's Mainstar Recapped here. I'm going to explain a crime thriller film called Henry's Crime today. Beware of spoilers. Pay attention and subscribe. The film begins in Buffalo, New York, with Henry, a man who works at a toll booth and leads a boring life. He returns home to eat breakfast with his wife, Debbie, one morning after completing his night shift. She mentions wanting a kid throughout their conversation, but Henry appears apprehensive about the notion. Debbie is offended by this and asks whether he still loves her. He responds in the affirmative, but his expression suggests otherwise. But a knock on the door interrupts their talk, and it turns out that Eddie, Henry's friend, is there. He is accompanied by a man named Joe, who is throwing up a lot in the front yard. After they carry Joe inside, Debbie, a nurse, tends to him. Eddie then tells Henry that although they were going to play baseball, Joe is currently unable to play due to his illness. Instead, he extends an invitation to Henry, who initially declines but then accepts. However, soon after they get to the Buffalo Bank, Eddie and his pal say they are only going to use the ATM to take out some cash. However, as they don masks and enter the bank armed, it becomes clear that they are thieves. Henry, who is perplexed, remains in the car and quickly discovers that it has been stolen and that the cables have been tampered with. Eddie and his companion flee the bank as a security alarm goes off a short while later. When Frank, a security guard, sees that Henry is wearing the same jersey as the robbers, he restrains him. When the officers at the police station discover that Henry wasn't a robber, they ask him for the names of his buddies, but he won't speak. As a result, the poor man receives a 3-year prison sentence for a crime he did not even commit. When he gets there, he meets Max, an ex-convict who is his cellmate. When Max inquires as to why he is incarcerated, Henry clarifies that he was falsely accused of bank robbery. As the two men grow close, Max appears to be a wise guy who informs Henry that not following one's dreams is the true crime. He claims that every one of the inmates there had lofty goals in the past, but that something went wrong in their life and brought them to this place. When he questions Henry about his dreams, the latter suddenly admits that he doesn't have any. The action then switches to 6 months later, when Debbie unexpectedly confesses that she has fallen in love with someone else while visiting Henry in prison. Oddly, Henry wishes her well in life and doesn't seem to be even somewhat offended. A year later, Henry is shown hanging out with Max and other prisoners. Max discloses that each time he gets a parole review, he threatens to break into his home, kill his dog, set on fire, and sever the tongues of all living things if he is freed. This is due to Max's acceptance of prison as his home and his desire to never leave. When Henry later inquires about Max's dream, the elderly man replies that he is living out his desire of remaining incarcerated. When Henry's parole review comes around, it appears that he also doesn't want to leave prison. But Max hopes they won't cross paths again and exhorts him to act appropriately. Henry eventually receives parole and is released from prison ahead of schedule. When he gets home, he is shocked to discover that Debbie is now seeing Joe and is even expecting a child. Henry declines Joe's job offer, which turns out to be a pyramid scheme, while he is gathering his belongings. Henry replies that he doesn't even know his name when Joe thanks him for keeping his identity a secret from the cops. That evening, Henry watches a woman's TV commercial for the Buffalo City Lottery. He returns to the Buffalo Bank the following day, bored and unsure what to do, and starts staring aimlessly. He is suddenly plowed down by an automobile that just emerges out of nowhere. It turns out that the driver is a woman named Julie, and she starts calling him a moron. However, Frank, the security guard, chastises her for being preoccupied with the phone. He even assists Henry in getting to a local cafe and comes across as nice. Frank declines Julie's offer to accompany him to the hospital, and he quickly discovers that she is the same woman from the Lotto commercial. Frank examines an old newspaper story that is hanging on the toilet wall, while he urinates after Julie departs. The heist of the Buffalo Bank during Prohibition in the 1930s is described in the article. A group of thieves exploited an underground conduit that bootleggers had previously used in a heist. The gang committed a multi-million-dollar heist at the adjacent theater where the tunnel is located. Henry gets an idea after witnessing this and visits Max in prison. He admits that the crime for which he was falsely condemned is his dream, robbing the Buffalo Bank. He begs Max for assistance, but the elderly man is stunned by such an absurd fantasy and won't leave his home, the prison. But Henry begs him to change his mind, saying that he doesn't want Max to waste his life and pass away in prison. Later, Henry visits a theater next to the bank and sees Julie and her team practicing a Russian play. Julie gets irritated when the director reprimands her for performing poorly and comes out as quite harsh. Then she sees Henry, and they go to a local cafe where he compliments her on her performance. She expresses gratitude to him for not suing her for the accident and feels honored. In a different scene, Max appears for his parole hearing. Surprisingly, he behaves well and is released this time. When Henry shows up to pick him up later, Max is shocked to discover that Henry doesn't even own a car. He becomes irritated by this and attempts to go back to prison, but Henry reassures him that the bus terminal is close by. They then start planning the heist and go to the cafe, where Max discovers that the map is 8 decades old. He claims that because they can't rely on such an antiquated newspaper, the proposal is stupid. Henry tells him he doesn't have a gun because he doesn't want to harm anyone. After that, the two men go to the bank and pose as new clients. Max persuades the employee to talk about the bank's past by using his charm. He discloses that his uncle placed all of his money in this vault when he was a child and assured him that it would last for 300 years. When he inquires as to whether the vault is still in the same place as it was in 1891, the employee affirms that everything is still in the same area. When the employee inquires about the type of account they would like to set up, the two respond that they will consider it and depart. But Frank sees them. The two then go to the theater in search of the tunnel, where they run with Julie once more. Max tells her that he used to perform at the same theater as an actor. Using his charm, he becomes friends with Simon, a staff member, and invites him to show them around. Max starts talking about the old tunnel from a long time ago throughout this. The principal actor's dressing room is where the tunnel's exit is revealed by the gullible Simon, although it was reportedly sealed in 1931. Simon enthusiastically accepts Max's offer to work in the theater. In another scene, Henry and Julie start talking. She inquires as to whether Max is his father, which he refutes. He responds that he was just released from prison when she asked what he does. After rehearsal, he asks her out to dinner because it appears he has grown fond of her, and she accepts. In the evening, Henry meticulously prepares for his date and soon finds himself in a restaurant, where Julie is anxious and arrives late. She admits that she is sick of this location and that she intends to relocate to Hollywood to pursue acting after the play. When she asks him why he went to jail, he tells her that he was falsely accused and thought he was going to play baseball. She is astonished and amused when he tells her that he intends to actually loot the bank this time. When they get to her house, she forces him to practice the part and read the script. When Julie encourages him to play the lead, Henry unexpectedly performs admirably and demonstrates a natural acting talent. A series of events culminate in the two making passionate love that evening. When Henry invites Julie to his house the following day, Max blurts out about the robbery without initially noticing her. At that point, he starts to fear, but Henry reassures him that Julie is fully aware of everything and won't tell anyone. When he tells her, Max becomes enraged, but Henry calms him down by serving him bacon. When Max later shows up at the theater to volunteer, he quickly discovers that they need to get into the dressing room of the male lead. They will be able to continue digging without anyone knowing because of this access to the old tunnel. He devises a scheme to replace the male protagonist with Henry. However, Henry doesn't think it's a smart idea because he lacks acting expertise. The play's male lead quits the following day after receiving an offer for a more significant role elsewhere. Max takes advantage of this and tries to persuade Julie that Henry is ideal for the part, which irritates the director and the entire team. She declines, pointing out that Henry has never taken action in his life, but Max persists in pressuring her and even admits that would facilitate their heist. Julie grudgingly consents to suggest Henry for position, while being astonished to learn that Max planned the entire event for their purpose. Henry is given an equal opportunity to try out, but the director clearly declines to hire him. He does a terrible job at first, but in the end, he impresses everyone with his outstanding performance. Henry gets access to the tunnel that will lead to the bank's vault as a result of being chosen as the male lead. The two men soon learn that the tunnel is shut after breaking through the changing room wall. They choose to hire someone after realizing it would be too much effort for them to do alone. They encounter Joe that night, who is depressed because he was unable to provide for Debbie and the infant due to the failure of his pyramid scheme. The desperate man enthusiastically accepts the two's invitation to participate in their heist. The three of them put in a lot of effort over the following several days to dig the tunnel, and Henry puts in a lot of rehearsal for his part in the play. They are leaving the theater one evening when Frank emerges out of nowhere and stops them. He claims to have been keeping an eye on them ever since he first observed them hanging around the theater and at the bank. Frank acknowledges that he believes they are preparing a robbery, but he wants to go inside rather than report them. He reveals that an armored truck picks up money from affiliated branches once a month and transports it to the vault, where it occasionally deposits $8 to $12 million. In order to go around security and turn off the alarm, he volunteers to be their inside guy, but the three feel it's a trap, so they ask Frank why he's doing all of this. Frank divulges that, despite his 30 years of employment at the bank, no assistance was provided when his wife became very ill years ago. Despite spending all of his retirement funds on her care, she eventually passed away from the disease, leaving him devastated and bankrupt. He discloses that he has to safeguard his retirement assets because he will be retiring in just 2 weeks. After hearing his tale, the group decides to include him in the plot after feeling sympathy for him. Rehearsal at the theater proceeds as usual the following day, but Julie is still being reprimanded by the director for her lack of feeling. He claims that because she has never experienced love, she is incapable of understanding emotions. She feels awful about this, so she starts crying and leaves, with Henry trailing behind. When he tries to console her, she tells him that although she's a fantastic actress, people have always said she's icy, before kissing her. Henry assures her that she is not chilly, and it appears that their bond is growing. While Henry and Max are getting ready for the heist that evening, there comes a surprise knock on the door. When Henry opens it, he is startled to see Joe and his annoying pal Eddie inside. It comes out that Eddie wants to participate in the heist after Joe, who had been intoxicated, told him everything. Max dislikes him right away, pointing out that they're not planning anything and that Joe might have just blurted out gibberish. However, Eddie doesn't think he's telling the truth, and the two argue angrily. Henry intervenes just in time to prevent a physical altercation, and he grudgingly consents to involve Eddie in the scheme. When Henry shows up at the theater the following day, he finds that the play's premiere has been rescheduled for the same evening as the heist. Because he has fallen in love with Julie and doesn't want to leave her, this puts him in a challenging situation. He can't back out now, though, because Max reminds him that he was the one who got him out of jail to participate in the theft. In the evening, Henry tells Julie that he will have to leave when they rob the bank on the first night of the show. She is enraged by this, especially since Henry is now the play's main character and it wouldn't be possible without him. Henry tries to tell her that this isn't the case, but she believes he only used her to enter the theater. After the robbery, he attempts to persuade her to meet him in California, but she insists it's all right for him to go. When the big night finally comes a few days later, everyone in the theater is busy getting ready for premiere. In another scene, Frank signals as a money truck pulls up to the bank and enters the vault. Henry keeps acting in the play, but as soon as the scene ends, he runs to assist his buddies. In contrast, Max proceeds with the heist by going to the tunnel with Joe and Eddie. But as Eddie, who appears to be proficient with machinery, utilizes welding tools to unlock the vault, Joe starts feeling ill once more and keeps throwing up. They eventually succeed in opening the vault and taking a sizable amount of cash after that. They carry the money into the dressing room in sacks, and everything happens without a hitch. But all of a sudden, Eddie reveals his true nature, pointing a gun at Max and telling him to move aside. Then, in order for them to depart, he instructs Joe to put all the cash in the car. Since they already have their shares, Joe begs him not to do this, but Eddie refuses. Henry enters the room at this point, and Eddie hits Max with a rifle while also threatening him. Soon after, though, Max stands up and disarms Eddie before he can viciously attack. As the two guys fight over the rifle, it unintentionally shoots, injuring Henry's leg. Eddie is left gagged and restrained in the tunnel after Max knocks him down. The remainder of the gang then drives off after taking the cash to the car. But along the way, Henry abruptly requests that they halt, stating that he must return to theater. Joe is perplexed, but Max urges him to go after realizing his predicament. Soon after, Henry returns to the theater and, with his leg bleeding, interrupts the play. He boldly proclaims his love for Julie in public, leaving the audience and Julie stunned. The audience is thrilled since this story coincidentally fits the plot of the play. Henry is told to leave by an enraged Julie, but he refuses and invites her to meet him in Moscow. The audience starts applauding her acceptance of him when she declines. Intrigued as well, the director dims the lights and begs Julie to respond. Julie shows that she has accepted his love with a quick smile, even though she doesn't say yes out loud. The film ends before we can witness what occurs when she leans in to kiss him,